All right, let's get right into it. We're going to talk about a term you hear thrown around all the time, especially on the financial news: market volatility. Now, I know it sounds pretty complex, maybe even a little scary, but stick with me because by the end of this, you're going to know exactly what it is, how it works, and maybe even how to think about it strategically.
You know that feeling, right? One day you're climbing, everything's looking great, and you feel like a genius. And the next, your stomach just drops as everything seems to be plunging. That wild, unpredictable up and down feeling, that's it. That's the heart of what we're talking about today.
So let's get a real handle on those swings. In this first part, we're going to go beyond that roller coaster gut feeling and actually pin down what people mean when they say market volatility. Let's build ourselves a nice, clear definition from the ground up.
At its absolute core, volatility is just a way to measure change. It really boils down to two simple things: how fast and how far prices are moving. And I gotta say, this ocean analogy is perfect. Some days, the market is like a calm, glassy sea, and other days, it's a full-on tempest with massive, unpredictable waves. That's volatility in a nutshell. And here are the two extremes laid out side by side. On one hand, you have high volatility. That's the choppy, stormy seas with big, fast price swings happening all over the place. On the other hand, you've got low volatility. That's your calm, stable waters, where prices just kind of drift along with small, slow changes. Of course, most of the time, the market is living somewhere in between these two. So you might be wondering, how do people actually measure this? Well, if you want to get just a little bit technical, it's calculated using something called standard deviation. Don't let the fancy term scare you off. All it really does is track how far prices tend to wander away from their average price over a set period. It's just a measure of how spread out things get. Simple as that. Okay, so now that we know what it is, let's talk about why it really matters. See, volatility isn't just some scary word for bad. It actually has two very different sides. And understanding this duality, this idea of threat versus opportunity, is absolutely crucial for navigating the markets. And here's the key idea. Where there are big swings, there's definitely risk. No doubt about it. More uncertainty, a greater chance of loss. That's the scary part. But, and this is a really big but, those exact same swings are what create the potential for big gains. I mean, think about it. If prices never moved, there'd be no way to buy low and sell high. Volatility is what creates those chances. All right, so we know volatility is about swings, and that these swings mean both risk and opportunity. But how do analysts really look at it? Well, it pretty much comes down to two different perspectives: looking back at what already happened and trying to guess what's going to happen next. This breaks down that difference perfectly. Historical volatility is exactly what it sounds like. It's history. It looks backwards at the actual, real data and tells you how choppy the markets have been. It's a fact. Implied volatility, on the other hand, is all about the future. It's the market's best guess about how volatile things are gonna be. If you've ever heard of the VIX, the so-called fear index, that's a perfect example of implied volatility. So one is like a report card and the other is the weather forecast. Okay, this is where we bring it all home. We've defined volatility, we've looked at how it's measured, so now for the most important question: how can you make it work for you? How do you make it an ally instead of an enemy? Well, it all comes down to having a clear strategy and, just as importantly, the right mindset. You know, how you feel about volatility really depends on your goals. Some people, like active traders, are kind of like storm chasers. They actively seek out those big, volatile waves, hoping to ride them for a short-term profit. But then you have long-term investors. They're more like gardeners, right? They're trying to patiently grow their wealth over many years, so they tend to prefer the calm, predictable seas of low volatility. But you know what? No matter what your style is, here are three essential keys to handling those market storms when they arrive. First, you have to manage your risk. Know your limits. Second, be smart about your position sizing. It's the old saying, don't put all your eggs in one very shaky basket. And third, and this one might be the toughest but most important, stay calm. Making emotional decisions in the middle of a panic is almost never a good idea. And honestly, that's really the main takeaway here. Volatility isn't something you need to be afraid of, it's just something you need to understand. Because once you get the mechanics, you can stop reacting with fear and start acting with a clear, informed strategy. Knowledge really is power here. So I'll leave you with this to think about. The next time the market gets choppy and the headlines start screaming, what are you going to see? Will you only see the risk, the threat of loss? Or will you also be able to see the potential opportunity that's hidden inside all that movement? Your answer to that question
well, that changes everything.